for that time under Greg Williams while he was the interim head coach. He made Baker Mayfield into one of the most productive players down the stretch. Under the last 8 games, he completed 68% of his passes, through almost 3 touchdowns to 1 interception in the game at a QB rating of 106.2. And the Browns' points went up almost 4 points per game than under Todd Haley. So, I mean, there's obviously potential there, and they almost upset the Ravens and almost eliminated them for the playoffs in Week 17 for the second straight season, but a last-second pick prohibited that. But there's a lot of potential, obviously, with Baker Mayfield as the number 1 overall pick. There's a lot of excitement in Cleveland. Of these jobs, Sean, was this the most exciting job to get with the most potential, do you think?
I don't know if I'm going to say it's the most exciting. I would agree with you. It might have the most potential there. I think if you look at, not to be a fan here, but I think anytime you're able to get a head coaching job in one of the most historic franchises, there's got to be, a certain level of excitement just because. So I'd say the Packers hires have to at least make an argument for exciting. But I think potential-wise, I do, because that Cleveland team, they have some players, and they're missing a couple pieces still. That if they were to get them, they'd be all right. But I think to me, a couple of the times I saw Nick Chubb pull off some long runs, that was a really bright spot. That if he could develop into being a top 10 consistent back in the NFL with Mayfield, sky's the limit. I mean, you look at where their division is, and, there's no one really impressed in that division this year. So it could be theirs.
Yeah, I mean, there's dysfunction in Cincinnati, as it always is. Lamar's inconsistency in the playoffs showed that, maybe he may not be able to carry the team for a full season. And obviously, with what's going on in Pittsburgh, there's a lot of issues there. So it is surprisingly, for the first time in a while, for the Cleveland Browns division to take, and I think that they have the potential to do it. Again, if Baker continues to develop in year 2, the weapons get better. They continue to hit on more draft picks, and that defense stays as potent as they've been, led by Myles Garrett on the defensive end. I mean, that is a huge upside there. I mean, I would say it's tough between Green Bay because I get it. It's one of the most, as you said, it's one of the most stable franchises in the NFL. So it's really, if you were a head coach with any opportunities, those would be the 2 I would say that are the most coveted in the offseason.
Yeah, and here's what could make it really exciting and take the cake for Cleveland. The opportunity there is, like, if you ever could bring a championship to Cleveland, you would be beloved forever.
I don't even think that. I think if you just make the playoffs, I think they'll build you a statue. You get like a 10-6 record, I think they'll make you a statue. Doesn't take much. I think you'll be next to LeBron in Cleveland with statues, but outside of that. But no, if you win a Super Bowl.
Yeah. Now, with this hire, were you surprised that Greg Williams didn't keep the job?
No.
Based on the fact he came over and still gave him a chance there at the end?
No, because I'm a Bills fan, and he coached the Bills in the early 2000s and was clearly not successful. Obviously, the Bountygate scandal that he went through, and just his demeanor as a head coach, he's not great. He's a great coordinator. They're guys that are obviously great coordinators. They're not great leaders of men. And clearly, yes, while Greg Williams was at the helm, having Freddie Kitchens there clearly made a difference, especially for Baker Mayfield down the stretch, in my opinion. Now, for the bad and the ugly, it's the Cleveland Browns. There isn't much more to say than that. It's just to know that their potential. But we've already seen what they can be at 0-16 last year or 2 seasons ago. So there's not much more to say there. But Tampa Bay, Bruce Arians' retirement lasted a whole 370 days before deciding to come back. And coach Jameis Winston, a player that he mentored when Winston was a 12-year-old at a Southern football camp. So he plans to build around the number 1 overall pick, the former number 1 overall pick. And Jameis Winston has 1 year remaining on his contract on his original rookie deal. So it is a make or break year for both the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, especially Jameis Winston. What do you think of this hire, and do you think this helps Tampa Bay, if at all, moving forward next season?
No, that's a good question, and honestly, I'd say it was a make or break year for Jameis, regardless of a contract this upcoming year, because it seems like every year, he has moments where he looks like an incredible talent in the NFL, and then there's other times it's just like, what are you doing? And you often see that when you're young, but I don't know if we can keep calling Jameis young anymore. He's been in the league a couple of years, and been on some decent teams and such. Like, they have plenty of pieces there, maybe other than a run game. So I think what Arians does, and I'm not as familiar with Arians, insights into his play calling or philosophy and coaching strategy, but I think the presence he brings, I think the way he carries himself, that's what I see, from the outside anytime I look or read about Bruce Arians, and maybe that's the piece, that if he can really be a rock for Jameis to, I don't know, figure it all out. There's something going on there, and I don't think it has anything to do with athletics.
I agree.
He's got the physical talent.
He does. He obviously, and we saw it at Florida State, what he can do, and we haven't seen that potential grow over the last couple of seasons. It seems like it's been more of a regression rather than a progression. But the nice thing about that is, I think the defensive end will be solved with former New York Jets head coach Todd Bowles coming to run the defensive side of the ball. Now, obviously, that's where his expertise lies, and that's where Tampa Bay had a bunch of issues as well. So I don't think that it's all going to be on Jameis this season. I think a lot of the pressure is going to be off him, but he just has to be the player that we know he's capable of being. Now, again, it is a make-or-break season, so I'm assuming that Jameis is going to be not stealing crab legs, but more so in studying. That's just my opinion. But I think
that's what he should be doing.
Right, exactly. He should be in there studying, and I think it'll make the NFC South, that's already is very competitive as well, more competitive next season.
Yeah, but you know what? They have an opportunity there because, somehow Breeze keeps figuring out a way to do it, and the Saints are good. But at some point in these next couple of years, there's going to be at least a step back. And, it doesn't look like Atlanta has it figured out. And, Carolina, Newton's another quarterback. That talent's there, but performance is all over the place. So that division, I'd say, is pretty wide open if Tampa could put it together.
No, it's true. They have a good number one in Mike Evans, who's a top 15 receiver, top 10 receiver in the league. And again, Jameis has the arm talent. We've already seen this time and time again. He can go for 300, 400-yard games, but then he throws 3 picks, and then Ryan Fitzmagic comes in and does a little bit, and then he gets benched. It's just what the carousel was last season. A lot of inconsistency there, and that's why Dirk Cutter got fired. He was supposed to be the guy who brings him to the next level and couldn't do it. And now Arians brings a more veteran presence. So, again, final year of the contract. Let's see what happens there. New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins, 2 AFC East teams. So it seems that New England tries to keep running away with it every year, and they do. But the New York Jets have hired within a division and hired former Dolphins head coach Adam Gase. Gase was basically the Sean McVay before Sean McVay, and tried to turn Ryan Tannehill into a quarterback. But the problem was Ryan Tannehill couldn't stay healthy, and the Miami defense was not as disciplined. They tried to bring in talent on a 1-year deal, Ndamukong Suh, for example, and just couldn't get it done. But now that he has a quarterback in Sam Darnold, who seems to be a little bit more healthy than Tannehill, what's the potential there with the New York Jets for next season as they try to develop Sam Darnold?
Yeah, this one I'm not as in love with, just in looking at it from the outside perspective. And my brother's a huge Jets fan, and it kind of just seems like a Jets move. And what I mean by that is, I don't think they ever make really bad decisions, but it just never seems to work for them. Whatever they do, it all falls apart. And, I was at the Jets-Packers game in December where they had a 15-point lead in the third quarter, and I turned to my brother and say, hey, I think we're going to come back. And my brother's like, I'm sure the Jets are going to lose it. So, I'm not saying Gase isn't going to have some success with Darnold, because I do think Darnold is a solid quarterback. I think if someone develops him, there's a lot of opportunity there. I was incredibly shocked McCarthy was not a lock for that job.
Yeah, I agree.
He seemed like he wanted it. The Jets seemed like they were interested, but it didn't happen. And, McCarthy, for whatever critiques anyone might have in the last couple of years, did pretty darn well with Rodgers at the start of both their careers.
Right. There aren't many Super Bowl winning head coaches that don't have a job. I think the only one that I can think of right now is Brian Billick, but that's just probably for a different reason. Outside of that, most Super Bowl winning head coaches have a job of some sort, or at least that want one, to have one.
Right.
So it is shocking that he didn't get that. Now, for Adam Gase, he did get a raw deal in Miami, again, with Tannehill being injured and trying to work with Matt Moore for a couple of years, and that didn't work. And then, of course, Brock Osweiler last season, who didn't do as bad as people thought he was going to do. So he did okay. But the expectations weren't met. They didn't make the playoffs, and then they got trounced by Buffalo. They didn't care in Week 17. That just showed that they didn't care. And obviously, that's not a good way to end the season. It's not a good way to move into the next season. But I think that there is some potential with Adam Gase. Again, this is probably his last opportunity, I would say, to be a head coach, coaching a young, up-and-coming, developing quarterback in Sam Darnold. They have the draft picks. Now, can they fulfill that? We'll see. And New York is a tough place to coach. So if they don't get off to a hot start in the AFC with a declining Tom Brady as we see now, the Bills are still developing, and the and the Dolphins, which we're going to talk about in a second, again, there's potential for this division to get more interesting next season. Now it's just a matter of Adam Gase and the crew putting it together.
Right. So I have one more thought here, and I think this will lead us into the Dolphins, talking about them, is I think that you want to talk about the bad or potentially the ugly for the Jets, is that I agree. I think offensively, I think Gase's potential, I'm not going to hold Miami's, performance against him too much for the last, with what he's had to work with. Like you mentioned, Osweiler or Moore, who knows if they've really had a good, talent core around them. But anytime I see a team give up, regardless of their record in any game, no one ever says that about the truly great head coaches. Everyone always plays hard if you have a good head coach. So I don't know if that's how much Gase takes the responsibility for that. But I just, that would just worry me a little bit if I'm New York.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, Miami is definitely a party scene, but New York has definitely a lot more, just as much to do, I would say, as Miami. It's going to be definitely very interesting to see how those players react, especially Sam Darnold seems like a good kid. He does seem like a level-headed guy, but again, it's a team around him, and can he provide the leadership to rally the troops around for a bounce-back season? Now, speaking of the Dolphins, they are planning on hiring defensive coordinator Brian Flores once the New England Patriots are out of the playoffs. Now, he's been with his whole career with New England, starting in 2004 as a scouting assistant and going up to his defensive coordinator role this season as well. Officially, he is the club linebackers coach now because he did play linebacker at Boston College. So, turning players like Kyle Van Noy, J.C. Jackson, and pushing Stephon Gilmore into an All-Pro, I mean, that's pretty impressive. So that's an impressive resume for that. But obviously, Sean, as we've seen with the Bill Belichick coaching tree, it isn't as successful as you'd think it would. So what is the potential here for Brian Flores to turn around in Miami?
Yeah, no, you point out a really good thing, is that Bill Belichick tree is not, an Andy Reid kind of tree. And you wonder if that's just bad luck, or if because the Patriots have always been so good, some guys that maybe didn't quite deserve the chance got the chance. How much of it is as much as it pains me to say, is Belichick just a really great coach? For Miami, I mean, hey, at least we're talking about a true defensive guy. Not too many of them to talk about in the head coaching carousel right now, but it's an opportunity for them there, because you mentioned it earlier, they do need to take a step on defense. And I think he's got to bring in a strong offensive coordinator. Similar to kind of what we talked about with Tampa, getting Bowles in on the defensive side. I look at Bowles as a true defensive guy. He's probably more of a defensive coordinator than a head coach. I think you got to find the equivalent on the offensive side to figure out, is Tannehill, can he do it? Should Kenyon Drake get more touches? Can he handle being a lead back? and sort that out in order for Miami to have any kind of success.